All right. Hello, everyone, as you stream in. Thank you for coming to the final part here of our Return to Work Best Practices webinar series. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let people come in, just like we've done the last four parts of this series. So in the meantime, I'm going to pull up a commuting fact poll here. So this one is particularly relevant to today. We have someone here that's talked to us about the work we've done with the City of Boulder in their downtown region. So this is an interesting question. Downtown Boulder, Colorado has about 8,800 employees. So how much money do you think is spent annually on the commutes for those 8,800 employees? So this is spent by the employee themselves, by the city, by employers. So get your guesses in now as we wait for people to come in. Once again, thanks for coming here to this final part of our series. A great guest today to talk about the City of Boulder's commuting program that they've done. We're going to wrap up the series, so it should be a good time. I'm going to give it about another minute to let people come in. Once again, just if you have an answer to this, just trying to have some fun here to see how you all think about commuting and how much it actually costs. So how much money is being spent annually by commutes or on commutes into downtown Boulder, Colorado? They have about 8,800 employees. I'm going to give it just about 10 more seconds here, and then I'll close it up. So get your guesses in. Is it 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, or 30 million?
This is tough. There's some big employers there. I don't know the answer, but I'm going B, 10 million.
10 million? All right, let's see what
$1 million.
So a lot of people guess 20 million. The actual answer is $30 million being spent on parking, on commuting costs, and on transit passes that the city provides. So big expenses here, and that's not even to talk about the indirect costs as well that comes from commuting, which could be another $20 million. So this is all really interesting, but it's just a number. So we're going to talk a bit about how we can drop that number, what the City of Boulder has been doing to look at that. So I think we're good to go, Bobby. I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can get us started.
Excellent. Cool. Well, it's news to me that this is the final webinar in our series because I thought it was a mustache unveiling. Yeah, my wife was not stoked about this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Commutifi and Beeline's final webinar in the series. In our prior sessions, we've covered the importance of collecting data, analyzing that data, and using the key findings from that data to draft an airtight return to work plan. Last week, we had two really powerful guest speakers that shared their best practices for using technology solutions to adapt shuttle programs and carpool programs. If you haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to access the link that Josh or Andy will put in the chat bar where you can view the prior recordings. Today, you're going to hear from another really great speaker, Allison Crump, who resides in the city of Boulder, Colorado. Allison's going to share her insight and to her experience using the same process that we've guided you through during and throughout this webinar series. But before we get started, a few reminders. Please use the chat or Q&A features to be able to submit any questions throughout today's presentation. We will happily answer those during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Also, as I mentioned, you're going to find a couple of links. You're going to find a link to the free commuter analysis tool that Commutifi and Beeline have been offering throughout the series. And again, also a link to view the prior recordings from former sessions. With all of that said, I want to get a short introduction in for today's guest panelist. Allison Crump is a transportation planner with a focus on transportation demand management and community engagement. Passionate about improving public spaces, she has a wide range of experience in both the public and the private sector. She enjoys supporting Colorado's planners as the APA Colorado Professional Development Officer. Outside of the office, you can find Allison skiing, rock climbing, or backpacking in the beautiful Rocky Mountains. Allison, we're excited to hear from you today, but before we do, I'm going to pass the mic off to Andy at Commutifi, or pass it back to Andy, I should say, to quickly recap where we've been and tee up today's conversation. Andy, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Bobby. And thank you everyone for joining us for this final part. If you've joined us for the previous four, some of this will be review, but we want to really just emphasize the importance of some of this information as you're planning your return to the workplace, to the office, coming up here, hopefully shortly. If you're new, then this will be new information, and I'm going to go quickly through it. So as Bobby said, I put the link in the chat for you to find the recordings of previous webinars. We'll go into detail a bit more there. To start off, now is really just a perfect time to revamp your commuting policies. I've said this each of the past 4 times, but commuters are primed to change their behavior. They're looking to save money. And you've already established a great commuting program called Work From Home. So don't let that work go to waste. And ultimately, you might not have another choice. What we found from surveying our own Commutifi users across the country is that people are reluctant to get into shuttles and into carpools and vanpools and public transit. We talked yesterday about, or not yesterday, but last week, to a couple of carpool, vanpool, and shuttle providers about what they're doing to make people feel more comfortable. But you have to start now to make sure that that commuters can actually understand what's going on in the space. Additionally, driving alone rates are expected to increase relatively dramatically. So it's important to consider what you're going to do if your parking demand has increased past your own capacity. So thinking about that now, thinking about how you can distribute parking through work from home programs or anything else is important. And working from home is a great program to implement, at least in the short term. People are kind of excited about working from home, despite the complaints you might hear on Zoom or something like that. People want to work from home more. So opening that up to your employees should be welcomed pretty greatly. So knowing that, what are kind of the 3 steps you can take? And we go over this more in the white paper that you can find on the website that's in the chat bar. But the first step is collecting commuter data and developing a baseline. Then analyze that data, identify new programs that can work to lower your costs, lower your carbon, lower your commuting time. And then finalize your programs, create a catalog of plans, and share those with your employees. So really quickly, what does that look like? First, collecting commuter data, just as simple as a survey. Surveys can be complex, so we're here to help. Josh is going to talk for just a couple of minutes about the free commuter survey and analysis program that we have right now to help you collect that information. But once you've done that, it's important to analyze that data and develop kind of a baseline, understand where you are. And we've done this with the City of Boulder. And Allison will kind of talk a bit more about that process, but we've looked at how much, does it cost employees? And we had that question up at the beginning, almost $30 million a year. How much time does it take? How much CO2 is being emitted? And critically, how are current programs being used and what could get in the way of adopting new programs? And then really just come along and finalize all of that. And like I've said, working from home is a great program, providing resources for employees to buy work from home equipment, and then extending stipends to be used on non-parking commutes or carpooling and shuttles. This is really important, especially if you don't have excess parking demand. If you're a city with finite amount of parking, or if you're an organization that can't afford or doesn't want to pay for extra parking. And then at Commutifi, we care a lot about the environment. So we always like to say, this is a great time to plant some trees, offset your remaining carbon footprint. It's actually going to be a lot lower now because less people are commuting, especially if they work from home. So you can get to carbon neutral pretty fast. So all that to say, it's a lot of information. We're happy to answer any questions you have about that through email or through the Q&A function here. But I'm going to pass it over to Josh, who's going to talk just a bit about the free analysis program that we have. So Josh, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Andy, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. And, if you're like me, you've listened in on so many of these incredible webinars from so many different great companies in the transportation commuter space. And what we want to do is not only continue that conversation, but we've created a tool that you can take home or take to the office that you can use beyond the webinar series. And this is a free analysis tool, part of Commutifi. As Andy mentioned, it's completely free to use. I just put it in the link in the chat section. So if you see that orange blinking chat feature down below, you can click on the link, ask a couple of questions, and it'll give you a free survey link. And then the second link in that chat is the outputs. So you can see what you will get. It only takes a couple of minutes to register, but the idea is to, if you're a TMA or a transportation coordinator, a facilities manager, or someone at HR or a university, is to survey all the employees or anybody who is going to have a commute once the return to work, once we come back to what used to be normal. You'd be able to survey all those employees to understand what their behavior is like, what their intentions are on their commute home. Do they have kids they need to drop off, or do they live really close? Can we figure out ways to get them back to the office in the best way possible? A lot of people might be concerned about public transit, as you might be aware. And this survey tool is really a way for you to just survey your employees. You can build an entire transportation commuter program around this free survey, but we wanted to put it in your hands. A number of companies have already taken us up on this in previous webinars, so we certainly want to encourage you to do the same. So please click through the links, take a look at the free analysis, take a look at the outputs, and we'd love to work with you on this. So without further ado, I'd like to pass this over to Allison to talk more about City of Boulder and go to downtown.
All right, thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Crump, and I'm going to be here to explain our experience at the City of Boulder with you, and I really hope that it can help you with anything you're looking at, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. So I'll give a quick background of how we got to this point. A few years ago, Commutifi was working with City of Boulder on what's called Door to Downtown with our shoppers in the downtown area and providing transportation options to those individuals. And then more recently, we wanted to look at our commuters in the downtown area, and we have over 8,000 commuters in downtown Boulder. So we call it the Door to Downtown 2, or D2D2. This program aims to understand existing commuter behavior. And I do want to point out that this was conducted pre-COVID-19. So things will definitely look different, but that is one of the benefits of this tool that we used, is the fact that it is so dynamic. So while things will look different moving forward, and the information I'm sharing with you is based on pre-COVID experiences, we will be, it is a dynamic tool, which is great. So really what we were looking at is with our limited resources of things like parking garage space and funding for transit and increasing congestion in the City of Boulder, we wanted to look at how we can support employee commutes that can save employees time, money, and reducing their environmental impact. And then we're also looking at the employer and citywide policy level as well. So by taking the questionnaire, employees and employers are able to understand their own commutes better, and we can determine how best to support our downtown employees and really get that baseline information. So we aimed for 1,000 commuters to go ahead and register their commutes on the Commutifi platform, and we were aiming for about 50% restaurant and retail. We have a really vibrant restaurant and retail environment in downtown Boulder, but that is typically a more difficult demographic to reach when we're working on surveys and things like this. So a really key part of this program for us was the marketing and outreach to assure that we reached the right amount of people in the right mix that we were looking for. So when looking at this, I would definitely recommend figuring out the best marketing strategy for your demographics. So we did a lot of both in-person and online outreach. We can go ahead and share a little bit later the landing page that we used, which was really comprehensive. And we also had someone going door to door to restaurant and retail businesses in order for individuals to go ahead and take this survey and record their commute. So that was ended up being really effective. We did end up having about 900 individuals record their commutes, and this was by the beginning of March before things changed drastically. So we were pretty satisfied with almost getting to our goal of 1,000 employees, recognizing that things changed pretty drastically after that. So moving forward, we are looking at kind of a micro level of employees, and we really want to put the power in the hands of each employee, so they can understand their commutes and how they can make adjustments for themselves. And so again, that's a really great dynamic feature of this tool for employees if they're looking at making adjustments by saving money on their commute or saving time or looking at different options. So it's really great that the employee themselves can see those options. And then we also look at the employer level, kind of moving it up to a little bit more macro level. And this anonymized data at that level is really helpful for employers because they can see, for example, if there's clusters in a certain area, we can suggest van pooling and carpooling as a potential option for the employers to look at. Or for example, in the Boulder area, we have a lot of our commuters coming from a town north of us called Longmont. And there is currently a bus system, but we're looking at working on BRT in between Longmont and Boulder. So providing the appropriate outreach and education to those groups up there is really helpful for employers and meeting their needs that way. And then when we look at a city level or a district level, which this downtown area is a general improvement district within Boulder, it helps us to look at this anonymized level at a more anonymized data at a more macro level, because we can be working on TDM policies for the district or the city level. That's been really, really helpful for us. And again, like I mentioned, this was registered and collected prior to COVID, but it's really going to be interesting to dive back into this data as we move into this new normal and see how we can move forward. And again, the dynamic nature of the tool has been really helpful for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. That's some really, really powerful insight. It's always insightful to be able to see how things are actually put into action. And personally, I think that one thing that every successful commuter program has in common is boots on the ground. You know, electronic communication and employee or community engagement is always powerful via you know, snail mail or electronic form and things like that. But really how you change behavior and implement changes by getting in the trenches and putting the boots on the ground. So I think that's awesome that you guys went door to door. We have a bunch of questions that we're going to get to here in a moment, but before we do, we just want to announce that given the success of this series, we've decided to evolve these return to work sessions into ongoing occasional benchmarking webinars that will include guest speakers from both the public and private sector. What I mean by that, well, so far we've provided you with best practices in the data analysis tool with recommendations for your programs. But ultimately, what everybody really wants to know is what are others doing and how is it working for them? If that question's of interest to you, make sure to keep an eye out for those upcoming sessions. As of right now, we don't have a set schedule. Rather, we will announce each session as we learn about powerful case studies that we think that you're going to want to hear about. So rather than simply putting out a schedule and preparing content based on this schedule, we're going to wait for really powerful, meaningful sessions and then invite you to those. One last note for these future sessions, we know that many of you have taken advantage of the return to work data tool that Josh had mentioned. If you'd like to share your case study for the betterment of the community, please feel free to reach out to me or Josh at Commutifi, and we can discuss getting you involved on some of those future sessions, which would be very cool. Okay, now we are now going to transition to Q&A, but I'd first just kind of like to say thank you to all of you who have attended today, and a special thank you to everyone who's attended each webinar in this series. I think I can speak on behalf of all of the panelists on this call and all the team on the back end that's prepared this, and say that both Commutifi and Beeline Mobility are really committed to making impactful and positive contributions to the TDM community, workplaces, and in my opinion, most importantly, the environment that we all share. it's important to remember that every little change in our lifestyle really counts, whether that's rinsing recyclables before you put them in the bin, taking a shared commute mode once per week, or walking or biking to the grocery store to grab that one item that you forgot or maybe you need. Or in a best case scenario, you knock on the neighbor's door and ask for a cup of milk. All of these changes that we make, they're small, but they accumulate and collectively make the world a better place. So from Commutifi and Beeline, thank you for being here and attending and being engaged. We really appreciate it. Okay, I believe that we have some pretty solid questions for Allison. Andy, why don't you take us home, pal?
Perfect. So I will, I'll start off with a good question here at the top. So this would be Allison for you. How many people took the survey based on the outreach from the person-to-person kind of direct outreach versus the online kind of outreach? And do you know how much time it took for, having a single person or people going out and actually collecting responses in person?
That's a great question. Andy, I actually feel like you might be able to help me with that one, or at least the second part of it. Do you recall, I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head, how many hours she was contracted for? Do you recall the amount on that?
Yeah, I think so. We had the one person, there was one person who was kind of going around. She was a rock star. She was great. She went around and talked to, went into each company really and just talked to them, talked to the, an HR person or in a restaurant case, just like the head of the restaurant there. And I think he spent about, maybe half a day once a week for a month or two. So she spent a good amount of time, though some of that was kind of going back to the same places, and she had some great conversations. So you could certainly do it quicker, but I think she probably spent about maybe 20 hours or something on that.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, it looks like the next question, is there any, and I'm not sure what the mix is between who filled it out via the online outreach versus the in-person outreach. But again, Andy, if you're aware of that mix, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, we don't, let's see, we know that certainly the in-person outreach was critical to getting people to fill it out. Since the survey is online, everyone ultimately goes online. So we only kind of know by word of mouth, but I do know that those days that that individual went out and talked to people, we had big spikes of fill outs. So it's a really good idea if you can devote that resource to that, especially if you're dispersed over a city or a campus or something. That's a great way.
Absolutely. And I know it was especially helpful for the restaurant and retail groups, for sure. Let's see, it looks like the next question, is there any data on how the 900 users will commute once they come back to work? Again, I'll kind of provide my side of that, Andy, but feel free to jump in. We definitely have, the capability to reach out to people. I know at our kind of a more macro scale, Dr. Cog, our Council of Governments in the Denver region, is looking at conducting another survey and reaching out to employers. So that's at a little bit different scale and understanding how employees will be commuting back to work. And that's more of at an employer policy scale, not necessarily an individual scale, what we would be looking at for the 900 users. But I don't think, honestly, in Colorado, people are still, it's still that transition back. And I don't know if we have that information yet, but Andy, feel free to jump in if that's changed.
Yeah, we did reach, so, as kind of we've discussed this, as Allison mentioned, we started off this program pre-COVID. And so we sent out just a regular survey and then have had to kind of adapt that. And we have sent out a follow-up survey, which if you were to start now would be included in it to understand those kind of, users, the person by person changes. We do have, let's see, I think I put a slide up here. This is from the City of Boulder. So, they have, it's similar to what we've seen elsewhere, except, Boulder is a very active community. So a lot of people are certainly shifting out of public transit, but they're shifting to walking and biking, work from home, things like that, less than driving. So it's a little less impactful of a, direct drive increase. But this is from, I'd say about, a third of those 900 employees filled this out, which is good information. So, that's kind of what we can get. But yeah, as you said, Allison, it's great to understand the individual, but it's also great to understand the company. So there's kind of two levels there. And that actually is a good piggyback. There's another question here. How many took the national survey? That was that information I provided at the beginning. We sent that survey out to our users across North America, so the United States and Canada, and we got a really good number of people it out that kind of spanned spanned industries, private, public sector. We got some retail filling it out as well. A good portion of them came from California and from Colorado, but we did see some from kind of all over North America, and ended up right now what we're at is just about 500 or so people who have filled that out, which is a really good starting point. And we're continuing to reach out, and as people fill out that information, we're building this data to hopefully be useful in the long run across the country. So once again, if that's something that you're interested in, we can do this analysis just for your organization, and then also scale that up at the national level as well to look at that. All right, and then there's another question here. With the increased demand in single occupancy vehicles on returning to work, as we've seen, is the City of Boulder looking to implement a parking cash out program or any other programs to try to reduce that demand? What are you doing to think about people getting, I'll extend that, people getting out of public transit and maybe driving more and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I know something that's on all of our minds moving forward and as we move into this new normal. So I'll kind of approach that from a couple angles. With parking cash out in the City of Boulder, one of our local transportation management organizations, Boulder Transportation Connections, is actually for the past year and a half been working on a parking cash out program. So that is still moving forward, and there are kind of some strategies in development there. In terms of reducing SOV in this downtown Boulder area, there are some existing challenges that the parking permits for our city garages are based on quarterly prices. So it is a sunk cost at that quarterly scale. So it does make parking cash out a little bit more of a challenge. So we would have to look at a couple other adjustments to make that really viable in those parking garages. There are some private parking garages that have different pricing, but other programs that we're looking at to reduce demand. Actually, some of our local transportation management organizations, both BTC that I mentioned earlier and Commuting Solutions, along with our Council of Governments, are working on promoting a lot of different campaigns for reducing demand. Our Dr. Cog, our local Council of Governments, is really promoting a campaign called Telework Tomorrow. So we've all been teleworking, but it's really focusing on having that be part of your TDM policy moving forward, and how that kind of delves into that. And we're also working on ways to safely provide transit options so that we can reduce SOV demand. Right now, our local transit RTD is fare free. However, it's also reduced frequency. So providing those various options to reduce demand at more of a regional level, which actually is really helpful for Boulder because most of our commuters, over 60% of Boulder commuters, commute from outside of Boulder. So whenever we're talking about TDM strategies in the City of Boulder, it's actually more of a regional issue and a regional approach that we need to be taking. So that's why working with our local TMOs and our Council of Governments is really essential for the City of Boulder and for determining the appropriate strategy. So it is really a regional approach here.
Excellent. Thanks, Allison. Well, we are half past the hour. We're going to be respectful of your time and wrap up here. But again, we just want to say thank you for those that attended today, and a special thanks to those who have attended each session in the series. And we will make sure to keep you posted on the future evolution of these webinar sessions. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Great. Thank you, everyone.